Welcome to the Thoughtful Gamer Podcast, Episode 10, Rage Knight.
Mage Knight, Rage Knight.
Here with me today is Orion.
Hey, what's up?
And Matt.
Howdy.
And we are going to be talking about the brilliant game Mage Knight, or not so brilliant if you're Matt.
I'm just going to call it like it is tonight.
This should be a fun 10th episode. I can't believe it's been 10 already. I still remember recording the first one. And now we've hit the first significant round number.
That's great. What did we talk about in the first episode, Mark?
PAX East?
PAX East.
Yeah.
Good times. I look forward to the next convention episode.
What's that?
I look forward to the next convention episode.
That'll be PAX Unplugged in late November.
Yeah.
What'll that be, like episode 26 or something?
Well, I don't know.
Something like that.
We're at the end of July right now. We're doing 2 a month, basically.
August, September, October, November. So, it could be like 18.
It could be episode 20, maybe.
Yeah.
I'd like to say that was the longest Windows update I've ever encountered in my life.
Yeah, we just waited,
An hour and a half? Maybe 2?
For
it was like
a Windows 10 update?
It was like 1 day of Mage Knight. 1 day cycle.
Is that how you're measuring time now?
Maybe a day in like the setup of the night.
Oh, and refreshing the cards and everything?
Yeah,
that makes sense. So yeah, we're going to be talking about Mage Knight, designed from Vlaada Chvatil, our favorite, I think all of our favorite, our favorite game designer, right?
Yeah, I'd say that.
I would imagine so, yeah.
I think he's he's certainly my favorite game designer.
He has more top-rated games than anyone else, for sure.
Yeah. I mean,
for us, at least.
Yeah, I had Mage Knight. I think I had 3 of his games in my top 10.
Space Alert.
Mage Knight, Space Alert, and maybe Through the Ages, although that might have
that was in the top 10.
That was in the top 10, yeah.
And I think those were all in the top 7, even.
Yeah, I love those games.
And you admit that Codenames is probably the best party game.
Best party game I've played.
Separate from those kind of heavier games that made it into your top 10. So
he's got my favorite real-time game in Space Alert and my second favorite real-time game in Galaxy Trucker.
Oh, yeah. That game is just so much fun. That's
favorite Civ game, favorite adventure game, favorite cooperative game, favorite party game.
He's definitely my favorite game designer from the Czech.
From the Czech Republic?
Yeah.
Do you know any other game designers from the Czech Republic?
You should have thought of another one just for that comment.
But then that would have just been like singling out some person just to say you're not the best.
I'm trying to think. I maybe the person who designed Alchemist, but I don't know who that is because that was published by CGE.
Is that the game that I bought or the game that I meant to buy?
That's the game you meant to buy, but you bought Alchemy? Have we even opened the box?
I read the rules, but we never played it.
Yeah, Alchemist was very good. I'd like to play that again. But I have no idea what Alchemy is. Anyway.
One of my favorite Flash games from back in the day was the Codex of Alchemy Engineering.
What? I never heard of that one. And I've played a lot of Flash games.
It's a great Flash game.
Interesting.
I think I played that one, but I don't remember.
Go look it up on your favorite early 2000s Flash game website.
Congregate.com.
Congregate has gone downhill since we were in college.
Really? Oh man, Congregate was like the most non-sketchy Flash game website that I ever found.
Yeah, it was really good.
I mean,
it's not good anymore. I haven't been there in years.
I mean, for a while, I only knew that addictinggames.com existed.
That game was 100% sketch.
That was sketch. It was just
that was the definition.
It was a big list of sketchiness.
Yeah. And then you clicked on things and it was more sketch.
But anyway.
I don't even know how we got here.
Alchemy.
Backtracking a bit. Vlaada Chvatil, Mage Knight.
Perhaps the opposite of a Flash game.
Yes, Flash.
I would contend that that's not true, but that's something we can talk about
That's
later.
a very strange connection to make. Anyway, as you may have noticed, I love this game. If you listen to my top 10 podcast, you know that I put Mage Knight as number 2, as my second favorite game of all time. And after playing it a couple more times, it has justified that. I love this game. Orion, you would maybe put it in your top 10?
I would put it in my top 10. I haven't done a list to know if it's in my top 5, but it's definitely in my top 10.
Matt, would you put Mage Knight in your top 50?
It would probably make the top 50. Here's what I think about this game. This game is fine. It's fine. It's a fun game.
All right.
I'm glad we played it a couple times here this week.
See, I
think I am going to be antagonistic tonight because you guys love this game so much.
Yes.
I don't really get the hype. I think the game is fine. I think it's fun. It's got a lot of good things. You're going to have to convince me that it deserves discussion for top 10. And then you're going to convince me again that it deserves discussion for top 5. And then you're going to have to convince me again that you can put it at number 2.
I think I can do a good job at this. I have more debate training than you.
I don't hate the game.
I know you don't hate the game.
Despite how I will come across.
I saw you having fun. We were playing together, and you had fun, and you felt good.
I think what I said, or what I tweeted at you, was that it is like 2 hours of great fun packed into about 6 hours.
Well, I will just say that I think the game with you and Ben was the first 6-hour game of Mage Knight I played.
Imagine that.
That was the slowest game of this I've ever seen.
I was not the common denominator in the time of that.
It took you and I 4 hours?
No, we finished in 2.5 hours.
2 hours. Oh, yeah.
But you probably would have been another hour if we didn't get slaughtered.
The end came super fast.
Yeah. So put in another hour,
right,
probably.
You should tell us what Mage Knight is or something like that.
Well, first I want to comment that I think you're the first person I've ever heard who has a kind of so-so opinion on Mage Knight. People usually either love or despise this game.
Well, I don't know where the people that despise it are, but my guess is that they're internet people who hear people like you just
speak truth to power.
Wax poetic about the experience that is Mage Knight, and they're like,
disagree
you're wrong,
on principle,
which you are wrong, but that doesn't make it a terrible game,
right?
It just, I think, that's interesting.
Yeah,
I didn't know that, but I would say this game is fine. I would, this game would get, I don't know, like a 7.58, which is...
Oh, really? Okay.
I mean, in my average, that's like slightly above average-ish.
Okay.
Let me revise that. This game would get probably a little bit above average on whatever
your
tendencies
scale
are. Yeah.
Okay, that's better than I thought. Anyway, for those who haven't played Mage Knight, it is a sort of... It's an adventure game at its core, but it also is kind of a deck builder, but really slowly. So if you played a deck builder like Star Realms or Dominion, think of that, but really stretched out and not entirely about the deck building. So how it works is that every player is playing a different Mage Knight, and for some reason or another that I don't remember in the lore of the game, you're just awesome and you're trying to go destroy everything in your path and destroy a city. Don't know why, and I don't care. On your turn, you're going to draw a hand of cards from your deck, and those cards are going to give you some kind of option. So the basic actions would be movement to move across the map, attack to attack creatures, block to block creatures, and then influence, which you can spend to recruit units or buy advanced actions, or do various things at different friendly spots on the map. And as you go out and explore, you're going to be exploring more tiles, which I have to mention, the tiles are really cool. They're like honeycomb hexagonal tiles, so it's basically, think of a very small hex with 6 other hexes surrounding it. So they fit together, and it's a hexagonal grid, but it fits more spots per given unit of space than like a Catan board or something. So in the game we have set up, which is a 2-player game, we have 12 of these 7 hex pieces on the table. So there's a lot of spaces.
It's a reasonable way to do terrain.
I think it's a really great way of doing it, to get a lot of different types of terrain to fit into hexes, which as we all know, is the superior terrain mathematical shape, because it is the largest polygon that you can fit like that, I believe.
I'll agree with that. This game would be a lot more sucky if it was
Squares, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It is the largest polygon that you can do this with, right?
Yes.
Yeah. You can do this with triangles, squares, and hexes, right? That's it? You can't do it with pentagons.
Yeah. For a single shape.
There you go.
That's your...
I wonder what a triangle grid game would be like.
A triangle game?
Well,
triangle,
each hex becomes
centers.
6 triangles.
Yeah, that probably wouldn't work at all.
Are there any games? There has to be a game that
does triangles. That would be interesting. I'm going to have to look that up. Please comment below if you know of a game that uses a triangle grid. Is it still a grid if you're using a non-square shape? Now I'm really off track here.
I mean, grid is kind of a generic mapping term.
You can still give hexes a 2-coordinate location.
That's true. Yeah, I guess it's a grid then. The hexagonal grid. Anyway, back to the game. The terrain looks nice, and you're going throughout the countryside, and you're going to be fighting orcs. There are keeps that have people in them, and mage towers, and all sorts of different things that you encounter and try to destroy. But the heart of the game is this kind of deck mechanism, where you have a hand of cards, you look at that hand of cards, and you see what kind of move that turn you can pull out of whatever the cards give you. And there are a lot of complications beyond that. For instance, there's a magic system where there are certain dice rolled at the beginning of each round, and each turn you can take one of those dice to use the mana type indicated on that die. The mana lets you do the advanced action on any given card. So like a basic card is move 2, but if you use the correct mana type, you can then move 4. Same with attack cards and influence and all that.
You might say the powered up version, since one of the types of cards is called advanced actions.
Correct, yeah, the powerful... Actually, I think it's called the advanced...
Is it? Because the actions
rules.
you get are advanced actions.
Yeah.
Either
I don't
way.
know. Anyway, there's 2 halves to each card, and you get the second, more powerful half by spending mana. And then you can generate mana crystals. As you defeat things, you level up. You can move your reputation up and down by doing different things, which affects your ability to hire units at villages and mage towers and all that. And at the end, you're going to be fighting a city, which is basically a collection of some enemy types. And there are multiple different types of enemies. And so it kind of has that RPG adventure game vibe. It's certainly a fantasy setting where you're using magical abilities, and it's got the like medieval style weaponry with catapults and swords and stuff.
No trebuchets, sadly.
Yeah, no trebuchets for shooting 60 kilogram. Was it? Oh, what's the Reddit thing? 60 kilogram objects up to 300 meters away.
Something like that. Yeah.
Have you seen that on Reddit?
Yeah.
People obsessed with trebuchets? Yeah. It's really weird, but kind of funny.
Isn't there like a separate trebuchet memes Reddit?
I think
I would not be surprised if there are multiple subreddits about trebuchets. And like,
I built a
trebuchets are cool.
trebuchet back in the day.
Did you?
Yeah.
Nice.
I built a lot of them in Age of Empires 2 back in the day. One of the greatest computer games of all time.
Before History Channel just became about like
trebuchets?
Monsters.
Oh.
Well, now it's just about like monsters, and I don't know.
They had a trebuchet phase.
Yeah. They had lots of trebuchets, and I was all over that.
Yeah.
In middle school.
It's a cool piece of design. Anyway, I don't remember what I was talking about, but it's a fantasy adventure game. And you're leveling up and gaining powers, and obviously those powers are represented by additional, more powerful cards. You have advanced actions, you have spells, you have artifacts, you have units that can come along with you. As you level up, you gain skills, which are kind of sort of passive abilities. But the meat of the game is kind of puzzling out each hand, and puzzle is very much the word I want to emphasize here, because each turn does feel like a puzzle of what can I squeeze out of this hand of cards that I have in front of me to try to accomplish some objective and progress towards the end point of the game. And I think that puzzle is just so fascinating and so interesting almost every single turn that I just love the game. And there are a bunch of other reasons why I love the game. I articulated a bunch of them in the review that I posted just the other day on the website. And it's really hard for me to express why I love the game so much, but the puzzling is part of it, the sense of progression where at the beginning of the game, you might fight a lone orc and it seems very challenging or you have to take a couple of wounds, but by the end of the game, you can fight like 2 or 3 enemies without taking any wounds at all. But at the same time, every enemy fought along the way still feels challenging. It really nails kind of the difficulty curve of simultaneously keeping up the challenge of the game while also giving you that sense of progression and becoming more powerful. To me, it's just a brilliant experience.
I think the magic of this game is the experience more so, because there's so many different mechanics going on, and it's your adventure game as you're building your deck, but then it gets more complicated with all these different details on damage types and blocking and movement skills and terrain costs and influence modifiers and on and on and on. But for me, it's just this kind of similar to how Twilight Imperium is more of an experience than a game. Mm-hmm. I feel like this is kind of along the same lines of it is what we called it, an adventure deck building game, but it's more of an experience and this kind of growing in power to this big climax at the end.
So you're saying very different things. You just said very different things. And I hear what Marc's saying. There's this puzzle,
mm-hmm.
The hand. Yeah, you're on your turn. The puzzle.
Well, that's kind of the micro view of
the micro view, and I think that's fine. I like that. It's good, but it's fine. And you're saying like kind of the macro view of the adventure, and my response to that is it's fine.
Well, I
have major issues with both.
Well, I think one of the keys to why I enjoy this game so much is that it manages to do both very well.
It does both fine.
There are games where you think if you want to play well, right? Mm-hmm. You think usually in terms of like raw mechanisms, right? So like if you're playing a really good game, if you're good at Dominion, you're not thinking necessarily about the thematic cohesion of the cards. You may not even register what the cards mean thematically other than that they have a name. At least to me, right? You're thinking, okay, this gives me X amount of
I just have
like the cards are the stats, right?
Right.
In Mage Knight, I think it manages to do both, where you can think very deeply about the game in terms of the mechanisms and trying to plan out both short-term and long-term. But at the same time, you also don't lose the sense of, I'm blasting this massive dragon with a fireball.
This is so weird because I don't get that epic sense, and I don't feel like I have enough agency in planning out what happens down the line.
Well, that's the thing. You're not necessarily. It's different than a deck builder like Dominion, where in Dominion,
I think it's almost a disservice to Mage Knight to call it a deck builder.
Well, it is a deck builder in that you're building your deck as you play the game, but it's not. But it's not obviously not just a deck builder because there's so much more involved with it, and it also feels very different from any other deck builder.
Yeah, so
in that sense, I agree.
So this is right now we're just kind of throwing a bunch of things out there. Maybe we'll pick up some threads as we go. But to me, this game is a very much of a kitchen sink game. There are just a lot of random mechanics going on. So one of the things that I wish I had more control over is choosing the things that I put into my deck. But anytime I make a decision about what I'm putting into my deck, at most I have 3 options.
Mm-hmm.
And also the way that a lot of the cards are written, there's not a perfect synergy. So it's not like you're generally trying to get I don't know. You're basically looking at 3 cards and saying this card looks like this would be awesome if it comes up in the right time. And then you say like, so I'll take that one. But I'm never like really making hard decisions about what I want my deck to be like. I'm just saying that of these 3 cards that happen to be up, I'm going to take that one.
I don't want to sound mean, but I think you're playing the game poorly. Right? Because there's a couple interesting things. Yes, there are 3 options available in most cases when you're adding cards to your deck. To me, that seems fine. Because you're thinking about it from the perspective of a deck builder like Dominion, where you have a kind of overall strategy and you're trying to build toward that strategy. Mage Knight doesn't let you do that. I'll admit that. Right. It doesn't let you do that at all.
No. That's why I say I think it's a disservice to even really call Mage Knight a deck builder. I get what you're saying. It is, in fact, a deck builder because you're putting things in your deck.
But I think there is some interesting things to consider when you're adding cards to your hand. So maybe you destroy a mage tower and you earn a spell. Mm-hmm. The first interesting thing is that, unlike most deck builders, when you gain a new card, you put it on top of your deck. Yeah, so you know you're going to draw it next. So that creates an inherent kind of tension between, do I want to get the card that I know I can utilize on the following turn for short-turn gain, or do I pick this other card that maybe has a better effect towards the end of the game, but I don't necessarily know if I'm going to get it at the right time? You also have a tension in trying to kind of work with the situation at hand, but also plan out ahead of what your, some kind of end goal in terms of what kind of power you want to bring to it. So you have to think in terms of, okay, what kind of mana might be available to me when I need this spell the most? Or what kinds of crystals am I better at generating here? You also have to think in terms of, okay, what's going to be better for the deck as a whole? In the last game we played, I took a bunch of wounds early because that's basically what I had to do to advance, and I got a lot of XP out of it. But then on a couple of decisions in taking advanced actions and spells, I picked heal cards over really good action or attack cards because I figured, okay, now I can take a very wound heavy strategy to try to rack up a lot of XP and then try to heal those wounds out of my hand with my new heal spells. But at the same time, at the back of my mind, I'm thinking, okay, but this may be good kind of in the mid-game to clear out my deck as I'm advancing, but I have to make sure that, 1, I get better attack cards for the end of the game, the big battles at the end of the game, and 2, that I need to make sure I don't necessarily spend really good, or I don't necessarily get more cards with green mana because now both of my heal spells require green mana. So there's all these sorts of considerations you have to make.
I know. And I found myself taking all those things into account. I don't find it that interesting. It's okay. But like, ultimately I have 3 options at most. And the combination of things that I'm considering with the fact that I just have 3 options, I always end up just saying like, okay, this one is going to do this one thing really well. I'm going to do it, I don't think that I've done the immediate spell. The only thing that I can think of is like if I'm fighting in a labyrinth and I know I'm going to go right back into the labyrinth, I'll take the spell that does the most damage. That thought crossed my mind once, but that's kind of an easy decision anyway because you're not going to go wrong just putting high damage cards in your deck. But then all those things that you're talking about, to me, the importance of weighing all those things is lessened because you have so little control over what actually comes up, the order that things come up. You end up even wasting cards sometimes because it didn't come up at the right time, even though they're a great card. And there's kind of a probability, or not a probability. There's kind of a usefulness distribution that every card has. And it just seems to me that those are flatter distributions than they should be, to where just the random factor of how much a card is actually going to benefit you means that you're never really choosing a card that's that is that much of a better decision than anything, the other options.
Again, I would completely disagree with that because many times
there are obvious choices. Like, sometimes there are just obvious choices. But what I found is either they're obvious or you can't go wrong. It's that sort of thing.
I don't think that's true. I think there's so many more considerations that we could be making, and I sort of proved this. I know you haven't read my written review, but in the review I link to a session report from a solo gamer who, after like 5 attempts, beats the scenario we were playing on the hardest difficulty.
Okay.
And he has a very detailed session report, and it's absolutely fascinating. The level of thought and planning and consideration that he's making, it's completely beyond.
How many of his considerations were probabilistic?
Not many. He's thinking, he knows. Well, first of all, he knows the decks and he knows the enemies so well that he's taking cards specifically because he thinks he'll probably face this very specific enemy in the future.
So when he draws 3 dragons in the final battle, he knows that one of those can be
beat by this very specific card he gained in round 1.
Yeah. So
and he's thinking,
okay, that's fine.
And he's
but
thinking
I don't really, that's
of
not
so many more considerations and so many more factors.
I mean, I think that we're going to quickly get into another major problem I have with the game, but that's not like a goal that I want to work to, of like just knowing the distribution of the dragon's stats so that I can choose the right card. Like that, to me, that's kind of the cheapest version of
I'm
not
saying that I want to get to that level or I want to put in the time to get to that level. I'm saying the strategy is there. And I think it's a gradient to get there, and I think it's not necessary. I think it's a linear scale, which means that you can't make the argument that there's basically that like any decision is fine, but at the same time recognize that you can get to a level linearly where you're making far superior decisions.
Well, yes and no. So if you're looking for it as a pure cerebral experience of you will master the puzzle that is Mage Knight, then I think you can. But I don't think that's how... Well, that's certainly not how I've enjoyed the game. And I don't think... I don't know, Ryan, is that a description of how you enjoy the game? I mean, as you describe it as adventures, I get a different sense.
Well, to me, it's both. I think the adventure scale is what makes it epic, and each turn is what makes it enjoyable.
Yeah, I mean, that's my argument, right? It does both well. It does both the pure mechanical aspects of trying to make the best decisions tactically while maintaining the sense of progression and scale.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not trying to convince you that your experience is wrong. I'm trying to say that I think to argue that there are basically non-decisions when you're adding cards to your deck is just incorrect.
Yeah, basically you're getting to a scenario that I don't care to go there with this game, because I think there are so many other games that I would rather spend my time getting to that point. Like if I'm going to know a game of every card and unit in the game, I'm going to learn Twilight Struggle.
Sure.
I mean, one of the things I wrote down in thinking about this was this game does a lot of things, but it doesn't do anything the best. It doesn't give me any individual experience as well. There's always a game that does it better. All the mechanics are fine, but there's always something that does it better.
What game would you argue? Well, first of all, very quickly back on the last point, I probably agree with you that I don't want to get to the point where I've memorized all the cards, but I think there's enjoyment to be gained. At least in my experience, I have enjoyed getting better at the game.
Yeah. Oh, and I have too. I certainly enjoyed it. I certainly have enjoyed the last 2 games we played this week more than the previous ones.
Sure.
Because I even just recognizing thugs.
Yeah, you got the thugs both times.
Yeah. It was like, oh, I know how that works. Maybe this time I won't use thugs so much that I have absolutely no reputation.
Yeah, in our second game, I was the one that tanked my reputation.
Yeah, but I mean, yeah.
But
that does improve the enjoyment, but I'm not sure that's really a point for Mage Knight, because that's true of almost any game.
Sure. What I think Mage Knight does better than any game is the tactical decision-making of how to play out your hand. I think
Yeah.
it edges out Twilight Struggle on that, and that would probably be second place in that very kind of particular thing.
It's
Can you think of
interesting.
any games that do that kind of decision making better?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. That might be true.
I mean, partially just because there's it just
Netrunner?
overloads you with information to the point that you have to sort through the information. I'll grant that's part of it, but I enjoy sorting through it.
Yeah, I mean that was a big part of my experience. I don't know if you guys maybe played this more than I did early on, so I feel like I've always been behind in understanding this. At some point in this game, I was just like, okay, I'm just going to ask Marc every question that comes to my mind and not care. And it worked fine because you didn't mind. But, I mean, one of the things I said early on is I didn't like the iconography. I think I came around to it a little bit. It's not bad.
I think it works.
There's just so much. Like,
oh, yeah. There's so much going on here.
Every action, spell, all the cards are text-based, which is, again, fine, but kind of annoying when you're sorting through 10 cards or I don't know, 8 cards is probably the most that you're going to have in your hand. Mm-hmm. It's fine, but that doesn't increase the enjoyment for me. It ends up just being this big puzzle. Maybe there's a fundamental difference in you and I there where you find that puzzle great. I find it fine.
Yeah, I think that might be it. And I mentioned this again in my review that I get lost in it. Like, I lose track of time when I'm playing Mage Knight. I love sitting there and just staring at the cards and working out in my mind different variations of how to play them.
I mean, which
I guess that's probably the linchpin to whether or not you enjoy this game.
Here's what goes through my mind on a turn. I look at my cards. I think, oh, I have this one really cool card that I was happy about that would synergize really good with this one. So too bad I didn't draw those together. Oh, look, I have an influence card. It's not enough to hire anyone. Too bad I drew that without another influence card. Okay, what can I scrape together to move far enough? Oh, it's going to take half my hand just to move over there to those orcs. You know, to me,
you're going to die when you read this review.
It's just a string of disappointments.
But see, I think for Marc and I, it's a string of challenges of like, oh, I could move over to that orc and fight him, and I can spend my cards in this way to get over there and fight him. Or I could spend my cards in this other way to get to the town and recruit some thugs or some archers or something. Whereas you're like, oh, I didn't get this one combo that I wanted to play. And we see it more as this is the things that I'm able to sculpt my hand or get out of my hand this turn.
Yeah, I think the fundamental difference between how we're viewing the game is that you're looking at the board and you're like, okay, what could I possibly get done during this turn? You draw your hand of cards, you're like, oh, I drew this really awesome card, but I can't use it this turn, so I'm probably going to have to play it sideways for one move to get anywhere. And so you're looking at it from that perspective. Orion and I are drawing our hands of cards first, and we're like, okay, cards, what are you going to give me this time? And we look at it from the possibility space of the cards rather than the possibility space of what would be ideal this turn.
Yeah,
and I think you have to do that to really enjoy Mage Knight.
You must be right. You must be right.
Like, it's weird, and I'll admit, it's a very strange way to play a game, because most games aren't like that. Can you explain this?
Because to me, I can't understand how your way of playing it would allow you to enjoy the overall adventure so much. Because to me, I find myself wanting to enjoy different aspects of the game, and then it always falls a little bit short. So if you're so focused on you can't focus on like, I want to go over there and do this thing, and
no,
after I do this, I can go and hire some guys at the whatever, the monastery that's beyond those orcs that I'm working up to. So you don't do that, but then
I consider it. I'm like, oh, it'd be cool if I'm able to do that. But the very first thing is, okay, what are the cards going to say? Right? You you draw the cards and they give you the possibility space, and then you have to puzzle out how to maximize your actions within that space.
And even to me, I think
that's the really satisfying tactical puzzle.
Planning for, even the end game, that seems to be in conflict. Like, if you're doing things like picking spells that you know are good against a very certain kind of dragon, like, to me, that's in conflict with the idea of you just draw your hand.
I don't ever make that sort of determination.
But you'll grab cards that are way better towards the end game.
I'll grab cards that I know are good at AoE because I know there are large multi-enemy fights at the end of the game.
Yeah.
And I'll weight those a little bit more on, like, the turn before the end. And I'll consider, like, an action card that gives me more action cards early on over a really strong attack or something. I kind of have a view of what do I want to get done this day phase because I know roughly what's in my deck. And I know I roughly have this much move and this much attack and this much influence or whatever.
Yeah.
So I'm like, well, I can probably take, one hard fight, one easy fight, and move some distance. And so I draw my hand and say, oh, well, I drew a super strong attack hand. What's the nearest thing I can fight?
Right, yeah.
Or I drew a ton of moves, so I'm going to go and explore like 4 tiles and see what all my options are.
Right, because then you're going to be drawing your attack cards later.
The weirdest thing for me is trying to evaluate how much stronger I'm getting, because I'll buy these actions or these spells, and I look at them and I'm like, oh, wow, that's a really nice card, and I stick it in my deck, and I know I'm going to only see it, 3 to 6 times for the rest of the game. And it's this weird sense where it's hard to tell for me exactly how much more powerful I'm getting, though I know inevitably I am. And when I look back a day or two later and I'm like, wow, I just one-shot the Mage Tower, whereas yesterday I was barely able to take an orc.
And I'll say this.
I love that feeling.
You are inevitably getting stronger. Like, you would have to just try to suck to not...
Well, I mean, all the cards you're gaining are at a higher power level.
Yeah. So lots of games have this thing, point salad games in your Euros and other things, where everyone gets victory points or whatever you're working towards at a similar rate, and then the game is won on the margins.
Oh, yeah, the point floor, basically.
Yeah, and the game is won on the margins.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this game has that with your decks.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Again, that's okay.
I mean, I would argue it's probably necessary to make the game not snowball horribly against a bad start.
Yeah.
Or else that would be miserable.
Well, that's part of the game balance, is that you have to get more powerful throughout the game to fight the stronger enemies to get to the boss. But, yeah. I mean, that's in like any RPG, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I guess, I don't know. It's just another one of those things in this game that I kind of scratch my head and I'm like, okay, that makes sense. It happens, but it kind of leaves me out of the process a little bit.
I think it just obscures the details a little bit. Whereas if you were playing, I've been playing Darkest Dungeon a little bit recently, and you can like level up your weapon and see exactly your damage range goes from 5 to 9 to 6 to 10, and your crit chance goes up by 2% or something, and you can see exactly how much stronger you get. And then you can go take a battle and see, oh, I can do more damage now. Whereas this, you're adding skills or spells to your deck.
That are going to show up sometime.
That are going to show up.
Sometime.
And are going to do something for you.
Yeah.
Well, yes, they're going to show up sometime, but with the deck building constraint, they're going to show up in the next phase. And then the phase after that, and then the phase after that.
Yeah.
You just don't know exactly where in your deck. And there are some things you can do to mitigate that randomness. There's certain ways to search for cards or draw additional cards or cycle cards, things like that. But you get a new powerful ability into your deck that you're going to be able to use. And the way I play, I don't take a card saying like, oh, I'm targeting that monster hole 3 tiles forward with this because I'm going to get there tomorrow. I might think like, I might try to get an attack card if I know I'm going to go through some fights the next day, because I'll know I'll want it. Mm-hmm. But I'm not thinking of specific enemies. What I might do is I'll take my hand, if I'm on top of a keep or something, and then I'll look at the possible enemies and say, can I beat most of the possible enemies with this hand? Okay, yes, I will go ahead and do this assault, or I will invade this labyrinth or whatever.
I have another slightly related criticism. Do you want it? Or
Go for it.
Yeah, so you brought up something very quickly that I have another kind of problem with the game. There's so much post-decision randomness. So when you're deciding whether you're going to go into a place, a lot of the places are... You can see what the orcs are. They're face up.
Yep.
So you can say, like, okay, this orc has double attack, so if I'm going to block it, I have to block twice, but I can definitely take 4 attack, or I can attack 4 to kill it. So you make all those decisions before you go in. But most of the baddies, almost all of the higher level bad guys are, you go into a place, you spend the movement, which is hard to come by, or like it comes when it comes, and then you get the token and you flip it over, like, oh crap, it was that one dragon that you didn't have a build for.
Sure,
that happens.
But I mean, that's a risk you're taking. Like, the game provides you with a reference sheet with all the enemies, I think, for a reason. And it's a risk mitigation play. But it's not like if you are...
I mean, that's literally...
It's not a situation where if you're unable to beat it, you're, like, completely, like, permanently knocked out or something.
Yeah.
It's not going to wipe you out of the game.
Yeah, but it's the difference between... If it's a dragon, it's the difference between getting 8 or 9 XP and leveling up, getting another card and special ability, or getting some wounds in your hand, maybe.
Yeah, so it probably sets you back 2 turns.
And wasting valuable cards. You only get to go through your deck once per day or night.
Right, but in any game of Mage Knight, you're probably going to lose to an enemy once or twice.
Yeah.
And in my experience, even on medium, medium easy.
We usually play on medium, I think.
Yeah, we've only won once on it.
Yeah, but
you can still have a shot at least at the end game, even with like losing to a high-powered enemy. I understand it is randomness, and there's a decent amount of randomness in this game, but it's not devastating enough for me to make it frustrating, and it just adds to the complexity and decision making.
It's just a weird combination for me. Maybe I don't know. Maybe I don't know what it is. Forget that thought. It's just a weird combination to me of you can only do exactly what your hand is allowing you to do.
Well, I think any given hand most of the time is going to give you a couple of different good possibilities.
Yeah. But then
which I think is fine. And then figuring out how to utilize those good possibilities to me is satisfying.
But that at the end, you're probably, like, at best, you're setting yourself up for, 75% shot at something big. Usually. I mean, sometimes you have a if you're Siege, you're going to kill a dragon no matter what. I don't know. I find myself in those weird situations of, like, I can't really do the things I want to do, but I have something I can do, but then there's a 1 in 4 chance that I just draw the dragon that I can't beat. I don't know.
That's fair.
I don't love that scenario. It's fine.
Yeah, and I think that's probably unique to you among us. But I think it's certainly something that people listening might sympathize with. I'll grant you that is definitely something that would frustrate quite a few people. And I'm not saying I don't at all claim that Mage Knight is a good fit for everyone. It's probably not a good fit for most people who play board games. First, because it's long. 3.5 hours is probably average for us for a 2-player game, and we know what we're doing. 3 to 3.5 hours probably.
Yeah, thereabouts.
It's long. It is the most fiddly game I think we own.
It's got quite a learning curve.
It has an atrocious rulebook, a really, really bad rulebook.
I mean, just have Marc around so you can ask him 50 questions in your first playthrough.
Yeah, that works. Whenever I get video capabilities, I think one of the first things I want to do is to do a fairly quick Mage Knight rules explanation.
Yeah.
because there is one video rules explanation out there that people recommend, but if I remember right, it's like an hour and 15 minutes. I bet I could get it down to half an hour, maybe.
I saw one
Depends
where the
how much
guy
text
like
you're gonna explain.
plays through the first round or something.
Oh, is that what it was?
That's the one I saw. I don't know if that's what you were referring to. But
There's one that people always recommend that I looked up a while ago.
okay.
But sidestepping a bit, I was curious because I was thinking Mage Knight falls into that really weird board game, not genre, but kind of genre of like doing your best in bad situations, right? Because a lot of board games are about building up, and it's about being the fastest at building up something, or it's about being the most strategically keen to outwit your opponent. But there's some games where it's like you're presented with bad situations and you're trying to mitigate those as best as you can. And I think Mage Knight kind of fits into that.
In a micro sense, maybe?
On a hand-by-hand sense, where you're not, unless you get a really lucky draw, you're not going to be able to do exactly what you want to do that turn ideally. But you're given the hand you're given, and you have to work out what you can do positively out of that hand, even though it may not be ideal or it's a random hodgepodge.
That's fair.
And I looked at my top 10, and I think I could make... I think 4 of the top 10 games that I've listed firmly fall into that category, which may be indicative that I really like that sensation.
That's interesting.
Right? So Twilight Struggle, obviously, is like the king of that feeling. Mage Knight. Space Alert's kind of the same thing. We're given, bad things are happening to you and you're trying to optimize in real time in that situation how to mitigate them as best as possible.
Sure, you can make that argument.
And then Dominant Species. In that case, the bad thing is every other player.
I don't know if I buy that categorization.
Yeah, now that you've read the 4, I'm not sure that I buy it. I'm not sure I buy it with Dominant Species.
That might be fair.
And I think Space Alert is just such a different animal that I don't think
I think it's painting with a pretty broad stroke to say a real-time game is this making the best of a bad situation. I don't know. It feels like the wrong way of
harm mitigation, I guess. But then, yeah, maybe it's a poor categorization. But those games give me the same kind of feeling of like, the millstone is really like tight around my neck, and I need to squeeze. I need to squeeze as much benefit out of it as possible.
Maybe you're looking for millstones.
Agricola would be another one.
Yeah, I don't like that all that well.
See, these are games I absolutely love.
Yeah.
And so maybe I'm just slightly masochistic in my board game preferences.
You like the struggle.
I like the struggle.
I buy that.
But I think Mage Knight is like that.
So what Mage Knight doesn't give you doesn't give me is a sense of real power, like engine ramping to the point where I'm huge and unstoppable.
I would agree with that. It doesn't give me that sense until the final battles, like the big boss battles at the end, when if I do things correctly, I can kind of hone my hand into a bunch of really good action cards, and then it's like, wow, I just defeated 6 enemies at once, and I took 3 wounds. And at the beginning of the game, I fought the lowest level orc and took 2 wounds.
Yeah.
Like, it's kind of a weird sudden realization. It's like, wow, I really did get substantially more powerful throughout this game.
Okay.
But you don't necessarily feel it as you, like, in between those points. It feels more like a grind, I think, to me at least.
Yeah. No, I've had, I forget if it was the last time we played or the one before that, but I had just a fantastic hand, and I killed, my entire share of the final army and didn't take a single wound.
Oh, yeah.
And that when you have that experience, which is not always the case because randomness factors and various things, and the whole, there's so many variables that go into getting to that point. But when you have that just is so amazing to be like, oh man, I just sniped all of this stuff with my siege attacks, and then I blocked and killed everything. And it's so supremely satisfying to get that payoff at the end.
You feel awesome. you're like, wow, I figured it out. I knew my hand had it in it, and I figured it out, and I am awesome.
Matt is grimacing at this.
I think I yelled that at one point during our first game when it was like in the middle of the game when I said, I'm like, I know it's in this hand. And I looked at it a while. I'm like, oh, I do this and this and this, and I use this mana and this crystal, and I'm able to get enough damage. And I think I was like, I'm awesome. I jumped up or something. I felt like doing that. Maybe I didn't express that.
You said that in narrative review, at least.
Well, that's what I remember. But I tend to exciting moments in my life tend to stay contained in my mind.
Your
rather than
of these things is more epic than the actuality.
Yes. I'm an introvert through and through.
Yeah, so I'm grimacing because, well, one of the things I don't like in this game is the end battle. Actually, timeout. Every time I've played, we played the same scenario. There are other scenarios, right?
Yes, but this is definitely the best one.
And we always play co-op, but you can play it in other ways.
You can play competitive. I've never bothered to learn the competitive rules because I don't see the point.
Basically, you can move onto someone's space and fight them, and there's some rules governing how that works.
Okay.
And then
I don't see how the game would be fun.
You're competing on points. And I think that scenario is set up where there's 4 cities out there, and you are trying to go out and conquer them all.
I don't know. If you find this supremely fun, I don't see why that wouldn't be fun.
Well, I think it might snowball out too much. Like if you really put the beat down on someone early.
Yeah. So anyway, I don't like...
I enjoy sharing the excitement with someone else.
Yeah. Okay.
And teaming up for the big final battle.
That's fine.
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe the competitive game is really fun, but I know that like the vast majority of people only play solo or co-op, so I'm satisfied not having played the competitive.
Okay, I need to go back through the things that I'm meh on that we just talked about.
For it.
First of all, the co-op is meh. It's fine, but it's like you don't really get the co-op experience because
there's not much
doing
cooperation.
Things. My co-op experience in the last
it's not co-op like Space Alert is that you're coordinating actions.
It's co-op.
It's a solo game you can play with multiple people.
Yeah, and then you're probably going to get back together for the very end.
Yeah.
My experience with the co-op is that Marc stole the mana that I needed a couple times, and I was really mad at him.
Well, maybe some people should express how badly they need a particular mana type before another player takes it. I wasn't aware you desperately needed that mana.
I should have... I don't know. Should have said something other than what I said. So that's co-op. There's that. The end battle is just... It's just more of everything that you've done. It's not its unique thing. So you described like that last battle. If it pans out, it's you defeating like, I don't know, 8 things.
Sure.
Or whatever. Depending on how you split it up. It's fine, but it's like it's literally the same things that you've been fighting the whole game.
Yeah.
Except you're not worried about taking wounds because it's the end of the game. So you get a few extra hit points, you know, more or less. And the feeling of satisfaction that I am looking for is mitigated by the fact that my hand's just random. So maybe I drew the perfect hand. I think
you're overplaying this random thing.
If you play strategically and you play well, your final hand will essentially not be random because you will have time to cycle out all the cards you don't want.
Well, that's not true because we
say random.
No, it's not true because we ran into in this last game that we lost.
Well, we didn't play well.
Okay,
strategically, and we got hosed by the AI.
We didn't play perfectly, so that at the end of the game, we didn't have enough time to get in position, and then I just ended up fighting Volcare by myself and took 18 wounds, and I did a lot of damage. I
believe we brought it down to 17 wounds.
Oh, yes.
Because you had the heal ability.
Yeah, but I had to put 2 in my discard as well.
I think the thing about the random hands at the end is that you're not going to get all of your powerful spells, but almost every card in your hand will be something you want there.
I guess that's true if you have time to cycle.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, it's not generally true.
Well, I will say, in the last game we played, that is the worst defeat I've ever had.
Yeah. Well, and in the previous game, if you remember, I just got particularly unlucky. I had an artifact and 2 spells I was excited about, and they managed to be in the last 5 cards. So where I think we agreed that I had the most powerful deck.
But I think you had time to cycle into those cards. Like, you were waiting around quite a bit for Volker to arrive.
I cycled a lot of cards and got down to the last 5, and we fought him. Plus, we had to fight him twice. So I had to cycle down to a hand where I knew I had enough cards left to fight him a second time.
Sure.
So, I mean, the point is that, no, you're not guaranteed. You can't set it up so that you can cycle into the perfect hand. No, that's an outlier.
You could.
I get that. No, you couldn't.
In most
I
games,
just described it.
In most games, Orion and I are able to do that.
Well, I think it's an outlier when it doesn't pan out. But I think you're.
I think the game is designed that if you play well, you're able to cycle into a very, very, very powerful, like almost
so
as powerful of a hand as your deck allows.
You have to be ready to fight twice.
Depends on how strong you are.
So you can't cycle into your most powerful hand if it means getting below 2 hands worth of attack ability.
Or you could have one person go for that and just resign themselves to be out of the second fight and try to defeat as many enemies. There are decisions you can make.
How is that satisfying? Whatever. Yeah, so, no, it's fine. Again, it's fine. You have this big battle. You're just fighting a bunch of things that you fought already, except, I don't know, you just do it and you don't care about the wounds and then the game's over.
Well, you care about the wounds in terms of points if you're trying to maximize your score.
Yeah. You're still trying to do the best you can.
I always care about the wounds because it's part of the puzzle of how do I take the fewest wounds. It doesn't slow down your progress for the rest of the game.
You don't care.
The game is ending.
Exactly. You don't care about it in that sense. You don't care about it in that. So
well,
you want to take as few wounds as you can, but you've at least won.
And I think thematically it makes sense, right? You're confronting the final enemy. And so, you're defeating them at all costs.
I don't have a big problem with this.
I mean,
it's just
there's not really anything necessary to like. It's just whether or not you find it satisfying. Yeah,
I don't think there's anything inherently satisfying in it. I don't know.
I think if you're going to argue about something being inherently satisfying, you got to go into a lot of psychology that we don't have the education to talk about.
Fine. It's definitely way more of a some will find this satisfying and some will not than a lot of board gaming experiences.
I would agree with that. Yeah, for those listening, I mean, again, I said this before, Mage Knight is certainly not for everybody, but I think for certain people, and this is why I think I see a lot of very polarized opinions on Mage Knight, where there's people like me and Orion who just love it and adore it, and then the other opinions I see are basically your complaints. A lot of your complaints, just it disgusts them rather than it's okay.
Yeah, let's take a moment.
I think that's a positive character trait for you on your behalf.
That just because it's not the best game ever, it's not the worst game ever.
I mean, it's a low bar to compare you against random internet people. So maybe I take back that entire line, and now I don't apologize.
Take it back. It's fine. I'll take it.
You're not as bad as random Redditors.
Yeah, I mean, let's talk about my experience. The game is cool. You collect things. Maybe you don't get exactly what you want, but you get cool spells. You get cool artifacts. You kill orcs. Who doesn't want to do that? At the end, you kill a bunch of dragons. It's it's fun. I think the puzzle is fun on every turn. I don't find all these things as satisfying as you guys do, but I don't think it's not like it's an unenjoyable experience.
Yeah.
So all you people that hate the game, just get over it. Play with your friends who are head over heels for it, and then maybe they'll play your game.
Well, play with one of your friends who's head over heel.
That's another thing for those who haven't read the review. 2 players is probably the max. 3 if you really have all day.
You can do 3, but it's going to be longer. I will never play a 4-player game of this.
So
with the expansion, apparently you can play 5 players, which has got to be a joke. to put that on the box. Like I love Mage Knight. I can't even imagine the slow, torturous hell of a 5-player game.
I mean, you'd have to institute some rule of 2-minute turns or something.
Or you do the side game. You do the simultaneous side game where you're playing something a little bit lighter on a different table.
What about competitive? And then it just becomes like Battle Royale. Like,
maybe
I don't know.
Maybe you play it with like a small
single
map
death.
and knockout or something. I don't know.
Maybe we should play competitive sometime.
I don't have a strong desire to play this game
I don't either,
competitively.
so I don't think I ever will. I think I will play solo tomorrow,
if it's the
though.
second best game ever made, I feel like you should feel a stronger desire to play competitively.
There's nothing about the cooperative game that I think would be improved by being able to attack my opponent.
Okay, here's the other thing. The game would just be better as an app on my phone that I could play on the way to work. Because nothing that I do in this game needs the 5 million pieces that are included in this game.
I would agree it would make it'd be a very fun digital game.
And I think specifically like a phone app, because you can also play one turn.
Yeah.
It's a nice little puzzle. And then you get off the subway and go to work.
Yeah.
And then at lunchtime you play another one and it's fun. I think I'd enjoy the game in that kind of experience probably just as much.
I think a lot of people would. I think I would enjoy it, but not as much as the real game. I talk about this more in my Twilight Imperium review. It's one of the games, this might be the only other game, maybe, where I think the length and kind of the way it takes up like the whole table and has all the little things to manipulate actually adds to the experience in a weird sense in my mind.
Yeah, it's definitely a weird sense in this game. I get Twilight.
It definitely changes the experience. I think there is a lot of fiddling with all the different markers and stuff.
It's not epic. You're not going for the epic experience, though. In TI3, that's what you're going for, and that's what you get, and that's the amount of table space it takes up.
It's not as epic, but I get a sense of epicness and giant battles and stuff in Mage Knight. In the last boss battles, I get a sense of it.
I could see it being a good app. I enjoy it on the table because it's fun to look at everything and see how you go through the countryside destroying stuff and your wake of, torn.
Yeah, I love
down
seeing
keeps
just
and
the
stuff.
wake of destruction.
All
your little tokens and like everything you've destroyed. It's great.
You know another thing about this game that's fine?
Is there anything about this game, in your opinion, that is not fine?
Maybe, I don't know.
Okay, go for it.
I really like the dice. The magic dice,
dice.
The mana dice,
are more than fine.
Cool.
Okay.
But just in general, the art is just fine. It's okay. It does the job. It looks kind of drab. I don't think that the unit art really matches the countryside art, but
I like the
it's fine.
the countryside art the most. I think I like the way the map looks especially once you get towards the end of the game. Especially like at a distance,
it's
it works
very
really
brown.
well.
If you like browns, you'd be into this map.
It's brown and green and yellow,
tan. There's some
blues in the mountains there, grayish blues,
some grayish whites.
I like it. It's pleasant. It's pleasant in contrast to the fact that you've just destroyed everything. You're definitely the villain in this game, which I find amusing because it's so disconnected. Like it's so amoral. Like you're just destroying
burning down
everything
monasteries,
for no reason, just
down.
for its own sake, just to become a better Mage Knight.
I mean, you're apparently a good person
loot.
when you kill orcs because you get rep.
Yeah, people like that.
But then you only killed that orc to get to the mage tower, which you burned to the ground.
Which then brings your rep back down. Yeah.
Right.
I think
you
it's
picked
funny.
up thugs so that you can intimidate people.
Yeah, I love the intimidation card. That one's fun.
That might be, yeah. Some of them are fun.
Where it's like
thematically.
influence, like way more,
okay.
or not, it's a little bit more
fine.
influence than the normal influence card, but you lose a reputation at the end, and it just shows a guy with a knife to his throat.
So if you for some reason skip to this part of the podcast first, go back to the beginning, but every time I say fine, take a shot.
The Thoughtful Gamer Podcast, Episode 10, Official Drinking Game.
I think you would have a good night.
I would like to point out that I am not liable for any alcohol poisoning to come from this drinking game, because I think you've said fine like at least 20 times. That's a lot of shots. Maybe just a drink. Maybe, the swig of your beer.
Yeah, that works.
But then we got to find something for a shot. I don't even know.
What would a Mage Knight drink?
What would a Mage Knight drink?
I don't know. The blood of their enemies or something?
Yeah. You drink just pure...
I'm more on board with this idea that just some people will really like this and some people won't. I'm more on board with that now. I'm more okay with you. I'll give you top 10. I'll give it your top 10.
Well, here's the real test, right? Do you empathize, I guess, or understand the experience, the really good experience we have in the game, and understand why we have that experience?
Do I understand? I understand the words you're saying. That doesn't equate empathy.
Empathy in the strictest sense that you can kind of feel... I don't know, empathy is the wrong word.
No.
Do you see why we like this game so much, even if you don't? You haven't convinced
me that the experience you say you are having is one that is likely to be had. You're leading me in that direction, but I'm not. I'm not so. You didn't sell me completely.
Sure. Okay.
You
didn't sell me completely, but I think I understand more of your perspective.
Yeah.
So we've had a productive conversation.
Yeah, this was productive. It's great.
That's the key. Well, I guess that's all we have for Mage Knight.
Mage Knight, Rage Knight.
Or Rage Knight, if you're Matt. Or I guess Fine Knight. That doesn't rhyme, though.
No.
It doesn't flow.
No.
One thing I was researching a little bit before this podcast, and by a little bit I mean like 10 seconds before we started the podcast, and I found an interview with Vlaada, and he talked about, and I thought this was fascinating, that first of all, he used to do computer games before he did board games, which means he was doing computer games, I think, like really old style, probably maybe strategy games, I'm not sure. But in this interview, he's talking about the difference between computer games and board games. And one of the things he mentions is that he actually designs his board games digitally first. Like, he creates everything in a spreadsheet and does like the math and the balancing on it. And then he'll create a digital, like, rough implementation of the game to try out before he even makes a physical prototype.
Vlaada, how did you do a hex grid in Excel?
Well, I don't know if he did that in Excel. And presumably he's pretty adept at programming, so yeah. I don't know. I don't know how far his digital prototypes go.
Okay, fair.
But I thought that was really fascinating because his games are so... It might actually give us some insight into why his games tend to be kind of more complicated than they probably should be, or maybe a bit... They're not elegant games, other than Codenames. Like, none of his games you would ever describe as elegant. Maybe some parts of Through the Ages.
It's more that the final product is elegant, and it's kind of, when you look at it, it's like a bunch of systems that you that seem thrown together, and then you play it and you're like, wow, this just...
Well, I wouldn't call it elegant. I would say they work most of the time, but there's often a lot of necessary and good, but still bloat to his games.
The button system in Space Alert's pretty elegant.
That's pretty good, yeah. Anyway, it might play into that, and then also... I think it also is really fascinating how, for someone who has a background in computer games and thinks of them apparently so mechanically first, that he creates such vividly thematic games. Like, we're kind of lukewarm on the Dungeon Lords, Dungeon Pets games, but they're hilariously thematic. So is Space Lord and Galaxy Trucker.
Those rules were great.
Yeah, I don't know. He's an enigma and... perfect person, and I want to meet him.
We have couches and futons.
Fly here from the Czech Republic, please. Anyway, to end the podcast, I want to quote a little bit about a really fascinating discussion on this interview about where he talks about the difference between computer games and board games from the designer. He says, "From my point of view, the big difference between computer games and board games is the role of design. Clever video game design is about how to trick people to play the game, not about the game mechanics themselves. And fluent experience is more important than intriguing challenges." So I think I want to unpack that a bit more at a later time. I don't know, in a podcast or an article, but I think there's something to be said about that, where computer game designs almost inherently are trying to trick the players or disguise things from the players, where board games really can't do that very much. I don't know. I think it's a very interesting topic, and I think he brings up something very interesting.
Could be really interesting.
I mean,
there's some parallel.
Computers have almost infinite simulation power, whereas a board game, you have to physically move bits around.
Yeah.
To track
Well, and
stuff.
it's also open to you. Like, unless you like hack into the code of a video game, there's stuff that you will not know.
Right.
Yeah.
There's an interesting parallel between print and video media, perhaps.
Yeah, we should talk about discussing that or like co-authoring something. It's a topic I've been wanting to talk about before, and I was really excited when Vlaada expressed the same idea. Anyway,
I actually saw another article from some other video game designers about how they design strategy games. So I think it was someone from Paradox and someone who does Civ and another Civ game maker, and they were talking about how their approach to making these extremely complicated games came about, and how, in one case they hated that everything was kind of just random behind the scenes and that there wasn't an actual system determining everything. So they built a system for everything in Europa, and you can dig down and you can find a system for the trade map mode, and it's super detailed and complicated. But they wanted that level of detail and simulation in there to actually show why everything happens, and so that the player can actually drill down and find that, as opposed to if they look at the code and say, oh, it's just actually random. It doesn't, in my experience, is not accurately describing what's...
That's really interesting. If you can
code.
find that article, send that over to me. I would love to read that.
Sure.
It's actually doubly interesting because Europa was first a board game.
Yep.
So, all sorts of weird things there. Anyway, that's our podcast for today. Let me know what you think in the comments. Check out the review of Mage Knight at thethoughtfulgamer.com, along with everything we do here at The Thoughtful Gamer. Hit me up on Twitter and Facebook, and don't forget to rate and review the podcast on iTunes or wherever you get podcasts. Goodbye.
The Council of the Void wants your soul.
I just hope your day's fine.